Hi, my name's Andrew Higgs, and I'm a manager here at Trade and Investment Queensland, and delighted to bring you with my colleagues the TRQ Global E-commerce Masterclass series. Today we're focusing on ASEAN, and today is the 19th of June 2025. I'd just like to commence with our acknowledgement of country. Our First Nations people are our first traders. Trade and Investment Queensland acknowledges their many nations and many trade routes, their giving of safe passage, and their exchange of knowledge, culture, spiritual beliefs, songs, dance, natural resources, food and goods. We respect their wisdom, resilience, and pursuit of trade in ways that enriched their communities and guarded the beauty and riches of the land. We embrace this long history and the present and future contributions from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to the prosperity of our state. Just a little bit of housekeeping for today's session. We're hoping that we'll run for an hour. So it will be recorded. So if any of you have missed or would like to watch today's session again, we will be sharing that on our website and via a LinkedIn post. If you have any questions during the session, there's a Q&A function, and we encourage you to write those. And toward the end, we will ask both our speakers and panel members to answer those for you. Again, after today, if you do have any questions and you are looking to launch into these markets, please book a meeting with our Business Advisory Services team, and our Trade Service team will be able to support you. You can book by visiting the TRQ website. Trade and Investment Queensland is, of course, the Queensland Government's dedicated global business agency for international investment and trade. We have 27 locations across 18 international markets, and we support 8 regional offices across Queensland. Our role is to connect Queensland to the world and the world to Queensland, and it's about driving global business opportunities for many of you that have joined today's call. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our Queensland Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner for Southeast Asia, Shannon Lay. Over to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Andrew, and good morning from Ho Chi Minh City, but good afternoon to everyone in Queensland today. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's great to see so many Queensland companies online with us here today. I understand we're joined by many companies who are already exporting to Southeast Asia, and for many of you, you'll be looking for new markets. For others, this is your first time looking at Southeast Asia as a potential export market, and so we really look forward to helping you in the region. I'll do a quick introduction to our team before I'll go into why you should consider Southeast Asia as a market for your products through e-commerce. So firstly, as mentioned, I'm Queensland's Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner. I'm based in our Ho Chi Minh City office, and we moved our regional hub to Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, 18 months ago. And I think that showed considerable vision given what an important emerging market Vietnam is for Queensland overall and most products looking to come here. We're also joined by Boyd Whalen, our Queensland's Trade and Investment Commissioner in Jakarta, and similar to myself, Boyd is a long-term resident in market with experience in government and the private sector. So we're all locally engaged, locally hired commissioners who are market, trade and investment professionals based here for the long term. Indonesia, we're joined by Didit, Reza and Irma, who represent our trade, investment and education portfolios. In Vietnam, Lanang Ha and Yung Duan, who represent our trade and investment portfolios, and we will have a Study Queensland representative joining us shortly. And Suzanne Ong and Anthony Cheng are based in our Singapore office. Suzanne looks after trade, Anthony looks after investment, and not only in Singapore, but also in the markets where we don't have a market presence, so in Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia as well. For those of you who have used TRQ services before, you know what we do and you know what we do well. For those that haven't, please feel free to reach out to our team at any point in time. We are here to assist you enter the market, so we can assist with market entry, we can assist with market intelligence, but also buyer introductions and channels to market. And there's no greater growth than the current, no greater growth in terms of a channel than e-commerce. And I look forward to our presentations today, both from Amanda and from Austin. Next slide. Thank you, Andrew. So as a business, why would you consider Southeast Asia? So firstly, the scale of Southeast Asia, 677 million people, so close to 700 million people, making it the third largest region in the world, following third largest market in the world, third only to China and India. So a huge market that can't be ignored when it comes to exports, a $4 trillion economy, and set to be the fourth largest economy by 2030. And most importantly, when you're looking for premium products, premium consumer goods from Queensland and exporting, we need to look at the size of the middle class. And if you look at Southeast Asia, in just 5 years, there'll be well over 300 million middle class consumers across the Southeast Asian region. And if you put that in perspective, if you're succeeding in Australia now, imagine an economy 12 times Australia's total population in middle class alone. So we really need to be looking at Southeast Asia for our export growth over the coming decades. The next point is the growth itself. When you look at Queensland exports, now close to $15 billion in 2024, 18.5% growth year on year, and our second fastest growing region for exports. So extremely important. And one of the pleasing things that we see in our role is the breadth of the opportunity. So whether it's tourism, we're seeing more and more Southeast Asian tourists discover what Australian tourists, domestic tourists have known for a long time, which is that Queensland is the best place to visit. We're seeing increasing aviation routes. We're seeing more and more parents and students decide that Queensland is a place to study, with over 25,000 students studying last year. We're also seeing opportunities in energy and a very broad energy interest from Southeast Asia. So everything from green energy to coal. We're also seeing interest in our critical mineral space. So it's an exciting time for Queensland in the region. As we lead up to 2032, we're also seeing increasing interest in infrastructure investment, not only in Brisbane and Southeast Queensland, but in our regions as well. So it's a really exciting time for us to be here. But if I was to name one sector that is the most exciting and offers the most growth, it's agri-food and consumer. And that really hits home with today. And I'm sure many of our participants on the line are within these subsectors. So when it comes to the complementarity between what Queensland can offer and what Southeast Asia demands, this is the area. We're an agricultural state, but we're also known for our premium brands and our premium consumer products. And so for me, this is an exciting time for this sector, and many of our staff across the region, our team within the region, have experience in these sectors, and we look forward to supporting you in that. The last thing I'd just mention is ASEAN itself. So ASEAN is a political and economic bloc, and that brings benefits with it. And we've seen one of the greatest benefits has been the FTAs in the region. So we have ANSFTA, which is so important for Australian exporters and Queensland exporters. It's brought tariff lines right down. So around about 96% of tariff lines are now down to zero as a result of ANSFTA negotiations over the years. And again, we're looking to uplift that at a federal government level, so that continues to be an area where we get zero tariffs further in the future. We also have RCEP, we have CPTPP, and we have individual FTAs across the region as well, which are helping Australian exporters succeed in market. The one thing I would say, though, is despite there being a more united approach within the region, Southeast Asia ultimately is made up of different markets. And when it comes to export, it's really important that you look at the markets individually. They have different regulatory environments, different business environments, different risk profiles. and also different scales of opportunities and levels of wealth. And this really is where our team, our market experts in market, can help you with market selection and help you find the ASEAN market that you should hit first. So I think that's all from me at this stage, Andrew. I look forward to taking questions later, but thank you again for joining us. It's a privilege to be here with you, and we look forward to supporting your export journeys in Southeast Asia. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Shannon. And it's great to draw on some of the points that you've made about the size of the region that really is on Queensland and Australia's doorstep, that's forecast to be the fourth largest economy by 2030, only a few years from now. So we'll bring you in later, Shannon, for our panel session. Thanks. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first presenter, who's Amanda Lamb, who joins us from Singapore. Amanda's a consultant and international business advisory with Dezen Shearer and Associates. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It is lovely to be here with everyone today to share more about the e-commerce landscape. That's right, I am dialing in from Singapore today. Over almost 3 years at my current firm, I've spent time in our Ho Chi Minh City office, in Auckland, a bit of time in Sydney, and now I'm back home here in Singapore. At my firm, I work on a range of verticals, everything from manufacturing and logistics, energy, FMCG, of which e-commerce definitely falls under. Next slide, please. Go on to the next one. So just to jump right in, it is really no secret, like Shannon mentioned earlier, that ASEAN is the next consumption frontier. ASEAN's got 680 million people, and they're driving one of the world's fastest consumer markets. It is so diverse, however, so it's really important to get a strong understanding of each individual market, and that's something that I'll talk about more later. But one of the reasons why you should really look here is that the region's middle class is expected to hit 350 million, and that is almost half of the entire regional population, coupled with rising incomes, increased smartphone access, and social commerce. That's really reshaping the type of spending out here. And also the type of social attitudes towards certain goods, services, and products out here. So if you're looking for the next big growth story, you've joined the right webinar today. Next slide, please. So when we talk about ASEAN, it's important to understand that the region's economies are quite fragmented. Singapore is a high-income, services-driven hub with a small population, but it's got an outsized financial influence. So Indonesia, on the other hand, you see this green line all the way up top here. They are the biggest market out here, driven by consumption, but it's still developing an infrastructure. Vietnam's growth, however, is export-led, especially in manufacturing, following Trump's first presidency. It also makes it a rising star for supply chains. Thailand, also considered mature, but it faces demographic challenges, and it relies heavily on tourism and automotive exports. There's also a really big emphasis on food and beverage out there, which we'll talk about more later. And Malaysia kind of sits somewhere in between, with strong commodities, growing tech sector. So while ASEAN as a whole is exciting, each country is moving at a different pace. It has also different strengths, and it has different sort of weaknesses, which is why a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't really work here. Next slide, please. So we also take a look at GDP per capita. So how much are these people earning out here? Singapore leads with over 80,000. Annually, and Malaysia and Thailand sit a little lower, around 12 to 14, and then Vietnam and Indonesia trail even further lower. So it is not one market, it is many moving at different speeds. You can see that they're growing, but growing at different rates as well. The growth potential, however, moving forward, so between maybe now and 2030, is massive, but these strategies that you choose as you enter these markets, they have to be country specific. And it is also no secret, sorry, next slide, please. It's also no secret that the digital economy out here is booming. So if we look at some of these graphs that we have here, the internet penetration is increasing. A number of consumers that are comfortable actually engaging on these platforms as well is increasing. There are lots of headroom that really that's maintained. Lots of governments as well around the region are also investing in these platforms and making sure that there is an understanding of the types of wallets that can be used as well. So when we see the digital economy revenue and we see the projected rise of it, we associate six main sectors that are leading this wave, and they are everything from food delivery, transport, online travel, online media, financial services, but most importantly, e-commerce, as we're all here to discuss today. So next slide, please. So if you look at the graph on the left here, as well as what it trails up to in 2029, you'll see that it's kind of growing at an exponential rate. And this is because the e-commerce market is really entering a mature growth phase following COVID-19. A lot of people started to get more comfortable with it, started to get more comfortable with using these social media platforms as well as e-commerce platforms. And the particular categories which you'll see most growth in the next 5 years, it would be groceries, fashion, and beauty and personal care. So while the online share of category sales may be sort of high to medium, the 5-year growth outlook is immense. We're expecting it to grow very quickly. But that being said, a lot of these consumers still enjoy going to the mall to take a look at products and to be able to trial them. So whilst that online growth is happening, it's important to also consider it from a physical retailer's perspective. So when you're really looking to expand out here into Southeast Asia, next slide, please. There are some pathways to market entry that you really should consider. And this is something that you need to discuss further based on your needs, your goals, and your risk appetite. So, taking a look at whether you would like a legal entity on the ground. You would be able to own your e-commerce store, yes, and have that online presence, but also you'd be able to engage offline, and you would be able to work with retail stores. You'd be able to hire a representative in the country. This could be having a sales team, for instance. So Singapore is typically a regional HQ for a lot of international firms. They would have a sales team on the ground here that would connect with their counterparts in some of these other markets. And there are many pros associated with this. Of course, the ownership of your networking contracts. You balance your risk with partners, but at the same time, it can be quite costly. There's high entry risk, so you have to know what you're up against and whether you're really willing to engage in the operational aspects of it. It is quite a lot to take on, and also there are regulatory hurdles that come with setting up an entity, but the pros are they're quite impressive as well. But if you don't want to do something like that and you want to just engage a distributor, that works too. It's a little less risky, I would say, and the distributor will manage your setup and your sales, but there unfortunately is low oversight. So you will not be able to really reach your customers as well because you would be working with that partner that would promote your product for you. So there is also an element of loss of brand control. It's still a model that a lot of partners, that a lot of people out here in Southeast Asia choose to engage with just because it is a little cheaper. And then following which, once they've explored the market and whether the product actually really sells out here well, then to establish a legal entity. Another up and coming way of sort of going about this is through e-commerce enablement. And when we talk about e-commerce enablement, we're really talking about the behind the scenes tools and services that help businesses sell online. So these would be things like digital storefronts, payment solutions, logistics, customer service, and marketing support. This is the kind of service that you can engage out here just to make sure that your product actually reaches the right customer. And to make sure that it's a smooth, trusted experience from the moment they click within the app to delivery. And then, of course, if that's not something that is preferred at this point, depending on your needs and your wants, cross-border e-commerce platforms is also an easy option, but you're of course just limited to an online distribution type platform. So very easy, but also very low reward in that sense, and it lacks long-term growth. So that's something to think about. But before you really enter a market, also consider the range of factors. So things like your capital input, like how much are you willing to dedicate to this venture? What are you willing to spend on marketing out here? Who are you willing to engage with? Because that costs money as well. Are there social media agencies? Are you going to work with certain influencers, which we'll touch on a little bit later as well? You also want to consider things like your firm size. Like, do you have the operational expertise to engage with this, the language expertise, the kinds of resources and space to dedicate? What about your product? What's your unique selling point? Your audience, who are you targeting? Competitors, who's in the market? So lots to think about from different angles. But these are four main structures in which some of these producers have chosen to engage out here. Next slide, please. We're looking at social media platforms. YouTube still ranks number one. So I have a little chart here on the left. Popularity-wise, YouTube ranks number one. Facebook and TikTok are sort of number two, and three would be Instagram, Facebook, TikTok Shop. But each platform has a different approach. And what works on Instagram, so things like polished visuals, like influencer tie-ins, it won't necessarily cut it on TikTok, where short, relevant, raw, relatable videos are more or more what drives sales. And on Facebook, it would be sort of community groups. But it's important to also understand that a lot of these consumers here use about between 3 to 5 platforms to make their decision. In fact, they sort of cross-check information to understand, how people are reacting to it and what kinds of trends there are that they would like to jump on. So think about how you would tailor your marketing campaigns. Think about how you'd want to engage who even like the right kinds of influences on each of these platforms just to engage your customer a little more and also to educate them. Next slide, please. But when we take a look at e-commerce, this is an overview of the e-commerce platforms that people turn to most frequently, but it's not an exhaustive list of all the platforms present in the market. So when we say Singapore, for instance, we're most likely to see people turn to Shopee, Lazada, Amazon, Taobao, TikTok Shop. But what I want to highlight here is that Shopee remains the top e-commerce platform across Southeast Asia, and Lazada comes in a close second. So that also means that these platform operators also have a lot of experience in dealing with consumers on the ground, as well as the types of regulatory hurdles. But what you should know, however, is that Temu was banned in Vietnam over concerns of unfair competition and pricing practices that could hurt local businesses. And similarly, in Indonesia, TikTok Shop was banned in 2023 because it blurred the lines between social media and e-commerce, and that kind of raised regulatory concerns about protecting small merchants and ensuring fair digital trade. So it's important to also understand who you engage with and how that ultimately affects your brand positioning within the market. Next slide, please. So even though e-commerce is growing fast, and as I mentioned a little earlier in this webinar, brick and mortar plays a really important role, especially for FMCG products. So in markets like Singapore, having a physical presence builds familiarity and trust with consumers. A lot of us like to take a little walk to the grocery store after work, take a look at some products, maybe types of cheeses, types of drinks on this. And then also if you get to trial it in the supermarket, that's fantastic. So that really builds trust and brand familiarity. So for everyday items, that's what you would like to have. For clothing as well, maybe a little pop-up store. That's something people would really fancy out here. So you could use that to build consumer confidence while also driving your e-commerce sales. So it could be a physical retail option first, or a larger portion of your physical retail option, and then pushing it on e-commerce platforms once people sort of have a better understanding of the product itself. Next slide, please. So in terms of influencer strategy, that is central to how consumers discover and trust brands. Increasingly, live streaming is also where the real engagement happens. So you would find influencers actually out and about with a little bit of a ring light and a smartphone, and discussing what they're eating, promoting different products in various areas, especially at trade shows even. events happening around town. And these would be primarily on TikTok and on Instagram. These influencers also host live selling sessions, and then they answer questions. And a lot of this tends to drive instant purchases. So you want to think about how you're going to work with this influencer as well. For example, just take an Australian skincare or snack brand entering the region. Running a polished ad might sort of build awareness, but having a local influencer show how they use that skincare in their routine would make an immediate connection with the audience. So, but the key when you work with these influencers is local relevance and wanting to see how you position both your product and to have them do that for you. So you really need to focus on having that local voice while also displaying your product and what your product really entails. What I want to highlight as well is that not all influencers here are equal. So celebrity endorsement is still a very popular route of marketing a product here. But in recent years, we are seeing more micro and nano influencers on the rise. So if you're not really sure what a micro, nano, or macro influencer is, I have these characteristics listed down for you, what they're best for and how your marketing strategy fit could look like when you're working with them. Nano influencers, so very small people, could be a lot of friends and family, even with a following. It's just because they're more relevant, and that's why people tend to sort of trust them through that relatability aspect. Next slide, please. Now, just to wrap this up, in terms of comparative market dynamics, we see here that, Singapore, strong on most fronts, premiumization of how you could tailor your goods. I think a lot of consumers out here in Southeast Asia like the idea of a premium good. So the extent of which you can customize it here is also displayed by ticks. So in Singapore, you could customize it the most. Also very international type of market here. Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. But Indonesia a little less so, just because they are very price sensitive out there. Even though they are probably one of the fastest growing markets, I would say. So that could change in a couple of years. In terms of regulation, Singapore and Malaysia are the clearest. In Malaysia, if you are selling a food product, your halal certification is needed, and that can take a little bit of time to get done. So make sure you have the necessary planning done and that your timelines worked through. Same thing for Indonesia, but a little bit more complex. And Thailand and Vietnam tends to be a little more complex as well in terms of defining the kinds of licenses that you would need, and also where and who you can sell to and in what areas. Logistics wise, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, relatively smooth, a little less so in Indonesia and Vietnam, just because they're rural areas, and specifically to Indonesia, there are islands. So the delivery time might take a little bit longer, and you have consumers that want to receive a product as soon as possible. Singapore, Malaysia, in terms of payment options, lots of e-wallet integrations, so also very easy for you to receive cash at the end of the day. A little less so for Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam, because it's very cash on delivery focused, very cash heavy markets. So in terms of ease of entry, I've highlighted that Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand are generally the easiest, but then again, you have to think about your needs, your capital input, your firm size, product, audience, competitors, and what kinds of goals you have in the market before really deciding which one to enter. So you can't just say, I'll go for Singapore. Also, a lot of competition out here in Singapore in terms of goods. So think about the kind of marketing that you would need to make this successful. Now, I want to wrap this presentation back up and just draw some parallels between these markets. So if I could please have the next slide. So there are many similarities between these Southeast Asian countries, but if you're looking to ensure that you scale it well out here, you have to take a look at your cultural differences, consumer preferences, as well as price sensitivity. You can go the extra mile by educating your consumer about the kind of good or service that you are providing on these platforms, work with influencers for that, work with retail stores as well. And also, whilst that is ongoing, take a look at what platforms you can reach consumers through. And you would need to work with several platforms, so 4 to 5, because that's how consumers sort of validate their purchases, and then think about it through a social commerce lens. Use influencers to really get your product and your messaging across. So that really wraps up my presentation today. If you have any questions later, I'm looking forward to answering it in the panel at the end, but I'd love to hand it back over to Andrew right now. Thanks very much.
Oh, thanks so much, Amanda. I think there was a fantastic presentation, some wonderful graphics, and to all those that have joined us online, we will be circulating Amanda's presentation as part of our post-event survey. So I'll get you to hold there, Amanda, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next panel member, who's Austin McKenna. He's the Commercial Director for Asia for a company that I know very well and have worked for, Metagenics. Metagenics are better known for their brands Inner Health Probiotics, Ethical Nutrient Vitamins, and Endurance Sports Supplements, and have a proud manufacturing facility here in Brisbane in Northgate. So welcome, Austin.
Thanks, Andrew.
So we've got a few questions, and we will prioritise those. For those that are online, if you do have any questions to Amanda or to Austin, who'll provide some case studies, please type them in the Q&A section and I'll be sure to read them out. So we'll first kick off with an audience question from my colleague Shelley Lewis, who asks, what role is artificial intelligence playing in shaping e-commerce experiences in the ASEAN Southeast Asia region? So I might hand that over to you, Amanda, to kick off.
I think that's a really interesting question. I actually was at an AI and blockchain event last night here in Singapore, and we talked about really humanizing the experience, really making sure that your consumers are able to engage with the type of product or service. And a lot of times when this engagement happens, they don't actually even know that they've engaged with AI. They only know when the consequence or the outcome has really come about. And so that is also changing the way and the landscape out here in which consumers engage with brands, as well as how brands respond quickly to consumers. So there's quite a lot going on in the space to ensure that even safety measures are in place, because if you're trying to engage a very young population as well, you want to make sure that these are tailored to them, as well as that these don't shape these ideas in a very holistic way, if you will. I'm curious to hear what Austin's also got to say about this.
Yeah, it's a good point, Amanda. And I'll be the first to say I'm not an expert on AI. So I think from the lens of looking at a consumer, I think it'd be really interesting how the AI starts to develop more an authentic connection or a 360 view of the customer, right? And especially Southeast Asia, the customer is younger. We have millennial and Gen Z that's rapidly growing into the market. Social commerce becoming a lot bigger, and so I think the opportunity for AI to have more of an emotional connection, because a lot of these younger consumers really want that emotional connection versus just a value offering, right? So how does this connect with me? And so I think once AI continues to develop, I think we can start to tailor products and tailor offerings a lot more effectively for each of these consumers. And knowing Southeast Asia, is a bit fragmented in terms of the type of consumer, AI can really start to pin down exactly how you want to target each of your individual preferences and consumers.
Yeah, certainly the customer experience is evolving and changing, and these days we need to be fast-paced with the products that are brought to market and tailoring those to new trends. Certainly AI is a trend that isn't going away. We'll move to our next question, and then I'll bring you in on this, Austin. So I'd be interested in what drew Metagenics to the Southeast Asian market, and what were the key steps that Metagenics have taken to launch across the region, and any early surprises that you found on that journey?
Sure. Yeah, good question, Andrew. And similar to what Amanda and Shannon were also presenting, really the population growth that we're seeing is a big factor. And so what we're seeing is that about 70% of the world's new consumer population over the next decade is going to be coming from ASEAN. So we really think about the millennials and the Gen Z. They're also going to make up around 75% of the region's economy in the next 5 years. So when we think about how we're targeting digital digital was very attractive for us, as well as just that middle class and the purchasing power of that middle class. One of the big beneficiaries of that is once you start having more dispensable income, you start to look at health, prevention, what can I do for my family? And that's really where the health supplement space can really capitalize. So I would say those are two of the big areas. And the lastly is really just the cost. I say the cost to play or the cost to invest. When you look at these more mature markets that we're in, like China, Japan, Korea, the cost to invest even digitally is quite high from an e-commerce perspective. So how do we get in as early as possible, build a brand presence, and over the next 5 to 10 years, you grow as these economies grow. So that was really what attracted Metagenics to the region. In terms of kind of some of our key steps, Amanda mentioned this nicely, is we really needed to do some market research. So we did kind of a simple graph of factors of accessibility versus attractiveness of the market. So as we said, Southeast Asia is not a one-size-fit-all approach. So we really needed to understand the regulations, where can we get in, where can we get in fast, as well as the size of the opportunity where our health supplements are a unique offering for that specific market and consumer. So halal certification in Indonesia and Malaysia can be a roadblock. So we've looked at some of the other markets first to be able to start with. And then lastly, I would say some of the surprises, Andrew, that we had is that some of our top markets, or excuse me, top products in Australia are not always the top products that you're going to have in these other markets. So we really need to have a strategy that we start with, but we need to be very adaptable and rely on our distributors in market to help us localize the offerings and understand that we need to move quite quickly and really test and learn. So that was probably the bigger surprise for Metagenics.
No, yeah, great response, Austin. Appreciate that. We'll move on to our next question from our audience. And I might bring in some members of our team. So please unmute and be on standby. You may want to talk to each of your 3 markets. So I'll invite Shannon, Boyd, Suzanne, Dee, and Reza. This is a general question. So it talks about what product category or business industry previously from Queensland has been really well accepted across Southeast Asia over the past 5 years, and perhaps which is the most promising category and industry kind of over the next 2 to 5 years. So I might ask Boyd, who is our Commissioner in Indonesia, to talk to Indonesia. I'll ask Dee to talk to Vietnam, and Suzanne for Singapore. I'll first kick off with Boyd.
Thanks, Andrew. So Indonesia's obviously got a huge and growing middle class, and there is an emerging interest in premium and health food products. And so some of these products remain niche and not mass market, but are finding traction in markets like Jakarta and Bandung and the larger cities. And we've found that premium beverages in particular are doing very well. So, for example, Bundaberg brewed drinks does very well in Indonesia across the whole archipelago. There is also increasing demand for health food supplements. The caveat I have to provide is that it can be challenging to get the approvals from the Food and Drug Agency here. So you have to go through all of those standard processes. But there is definitely interest in the market.
Yeah, thanks, Boyd. I think certainly out of COVID, we've found that there's huge interest on one's health, and certainly that's an area where the Sunshine State of Queensland can help. I'll bring in Suzanne for Singapore, so often a regional headquarters for APAC companies. Suzanne, what are some of the leading trends and industries you feel will do well from Queensland over the next few years?
Thanks, Andrew, for this. Hi, everyone. In Singapore, obviously, it's a regional hub, as you know, and most of the products from Queensland has been into the market first and then moving up to the greater region. Now, food and ag has always been the key, reason being because a lot of Singaporeans are well-versed with Australian brands and the trust in it because it's clean, green, and it has the relevant certification for this. Health and wellness has been increasing. We're not only talking about immunity support, but we're talking about even diverting it to sports related nutrient, given the fact that Singapore is really very driven with a lot of sports activities, and the government does initiate a lot of health promotion or cautious, because we are an aging population. So, they want to make sure that everybody's healthy. Now, it is a market that is very matured, very high competition, quite saturated to a certain extent. We do have a lot of Queensland products here from, like Boyd mentioned, Bundaberg beer, through some of the supplements as well, More Life. We also have some sports nutrition that is under different labels that has been contract manufactured in partnership with some of the Singapore brand. It is a good market to test new products like protein bars and protein jellos. That's really trending over here right now. Whilst it's an open market in Singapore, I must say that the health authority do scrutinize in terms of some of the prohibited ingredients. So this is where it's highly encouraged if you could work with a distributor in terms of cross-checking on your ingredients list, and if it's required, registration it's needed to be done hand in hand. So yeah, basically it's a really highly competitive market, so pricing needs to be very well justified as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Suzanne, and great to see some of the trends in Singapore. I'll bring in Dee, and mindful that our Senior Commissioner Shannon's also based in Ho Chi Minh City. Dee, what are some of the trends in Vietnam? What Amanda was presenting on the charts really showing strong growth in that market.
Yes, thanks, Andrew and Amanda. So it was very spot on that the growth rate for the e-commerce in Vietnam is really fast right now. And we are seeing a lot of platforms who can do like 2 hours, 3 hours delivery from the time that you're putting in the order until you get it to your consumers. So for us, for the Aussie brands as a whole, and also from Queensland, from the past few years, we have had a good numbers of products from the health and wellness category, including like honey and then supplements, any kind of supplements for baby, for pregnancy, and for people who are having like who need like special supplements for their daily diet as well. And many of our brands have actually entered Vietnam. Some brands Susan has mentioned, like More Life, also in Vietnam, Bundaberg also in Vietnam as well, both online and offline. So we have a very good mix of like the D2C, so both like in own channels, and they come in either by one good distributor or like from by themselves. But as also like Amanda mentioned, and especially this year in Vietnam, we at the government in Vietnam, they are cracking down on unauthentic products, I would say fake products or low quality products, and that is that pose both pros and cons for us. So the pros is that anything with Australian branded or Queensland branded is highly regarded in the market as like they have good quality, they have like authenticity. So that's a very good thing for our products to enter now. The cons is that because of the government campaign at the moment, tax is increasing for online sellers. So you have to have an entity in Vietnam if you want to sell online, and you have to declare all the online revenue. And then you have to also do like a lot of preemptive measures, register for your brand, for your trademark like a year or so ahead, so that you can kind of protect yourself in the market as well. It's still an early stage now for the Vietnam e-commerce market. It's developing very quickly, but again, when you have like fast growth, a lot of competition from like other countries around as well, because Vietnam is like right in the middle of all the countries, Southeast Asia, and then also China is up north from us with the border up there. So we have good logistic and supply chains from almost all the markets around. In the next 2 to 5 years, I think the health and wellness, at food, as Ford mentioned, will continue to grow in Vietnam, especially when our middle class is growing very quickly as well. Although the GDP per capita is at the like middle level right now, but we have very good chance to push beyond the middle income trap in the next few years. So that's from me, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Dee. Look, that's a really comprehensive response. And thanks, Suzanne, Dee, and Boyd for your questions. Shannon, I'll just get you to stay on screen for our next question that comes from Jeff Go, who's the manager of our food and agribusiness team at TIQ. I'll get you to answer this question first, Austin. Trade and Investment Queensland was delighted to help you set up your new Southeast Asia offices in Singapore. Jeff's question is Singapore seen as a regional leader that influences consumers in that Southeast Asian area?
I think it is, Andrew. Definitely the region, I would say Southeast Asia. It also, as we go back to, not one size fits all, depends on the market. So, you also need to look at some of the North Asian markets as well. In terms of what are those consumers looking at from a brand perspective. So Singapore is definitely leading the way, with regional hubs. But I think it's just a factor of the different markets. So, for example, Vietnam might look at, some of the trends and what's going on in maybe China or Korea. But Singapore is still definitely leading the way in terms of, technology and a lot of the advancements within the region. So I think it's definitely a place to keep an eye on for some of the emerging markets.
Is there anything that you'd like to add there, Shannon, in respect of Singapore's position as a regional leader?
Yeah, I agree with Austin. I think Singapore is an influence, but there's often, I think, when it depends on the subsector, but say, for instance, if we were looking at fashion or food, there's a lot of North Asian influence as well. So a lot of external Southeast Asian influence, I think, on consumer behaviors within Southeast Asia. And then when it comes to products where quality and premium are so important, like health and wellness, then it's markets like Australia, where I think consumers look to first and foremost. What I would say, though, is Singapore probably is the first market that people look to, just given that it's such a premium market, it's so advanced for premium products, but it's also a more competitive market too. So it has the affordability to purchase some products. The appetite for premium is there, and the middle class is large enough, but it's also a more competitive market too. So often we'll see products first go into Singapore and then look to other markets outside of that, as opposed to consumers looking to Singapore to replicate what's going on. I don't know if you had any comments on that one, Amanda, as well.
I honestly think you both nailed it. I will say there are, it really depends on the subsector and the kind of product that you're looking to market as well. So for instance, maybe if we look at plant-based meats here in Singapore, that has gained quite a bit of traction, but it is a little slower in Malaysia, in Indonesia, where things like halal certifications, the handling of these food products, people may be a little bit skeptical about the whole concept of, plant-based or lab-grown meats. So it really depends. Things you could also think about dairy alternatives. That's quite popular here in Singapore, a little less so in, say, Thailand or Vietnam. But that being said, it is on the rise there too, just at a slower growth rate.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. We'll move on to our next question, and this comes from my colleague Andy Tran. So he asks, what are 3 key things that brands who are looking to enter the Southeast Asian market should prioritise when it comes to localising content and campaigns across culturally diverse markets? It's important to understand there are so many languages across the region. I might throw to you, Austin. You've launched already in a few markets, quite a successful launch in China. Congratulations. And now looking to enter new markets across the region. How have you localised your content specifically for some of your products?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question, Andrew. And once again, it goes back to understanding the target consumer in which market you want to go after. And so when we think about a market like Vietnam, for example, understanding the purchasing power. So example for pack sizes, right? So if we need to look at a new pack size, that's going to be something there. You might have a smaller count for a health supplement, for example, where someone could be able to afford that. The other option would be formats or packaging. So if the packaging needs to be different, you might need to modify versus the Australian product. So a lot of what we've done so far in Southeast Asia has been cross-border e-commerce, which is, a little bit of that phase one of market entry to test and learn. However, you're not able to change the product and modify as you will if you register the product in market. So the key step is really understanding what's the target consumer need, and then also making sure that it's the right format, the right packaging, and the right price point for that market.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. An important question. I'll ask my next question with you, Amanda, and that's how do warehousing and logistics infrastructure vary across the different countries in the region? And what do you think that fast-moving consumer brands like Metagenics or others entering should consider as part of their regional fulfillment strategy?
So that's a really good question, actually, because logistics and warehousing infrastructure across ASEAN is really uneven. Coming from Singapore, Singapore has world-class facilities, so highly automated warehouses, advanced, cold chain logistics, strong regional connectivity, to name a few, and that's why it's used as a hub for Southeast Asia. And that being said, also Malaysia and Thailand also have solid infrastructure, especially in the major cities, but it tends to get a little trickier when you move inland or into sort of smaller towns. So where that last mile delivery tends to be a bit more challenging. Indonesia and the Philippines, just because they're archipelagos, they face challenges with their fragmented logistics networks. So where consumers do want a product very quickly, you'd have to think about how to get it to them, because it's not just about the product, it's about how quickly the product can get to them. And I'm sure Shannon, who's in Ho Chi Minh, can actually vouch for this as well. A lot of people would think about they would consult the various platforms, and I speak from my time in Vietnam as well. They would consult the various platforms and then see which one can deliver the quickest. Vietnam, however, I would say is improving faster than Indonesia and the Philippines, especially towards the north around Hanoi and the south near Ho Chi Minh, but the rural areas are still the toughest, I would say. But in terms of FMCG brands, I think these fulfillment strategies should be hybrid. So use Singapore and Malaysia as sort of a regional hub and have localized warehouses in these markets. And then consider how you would do something a little differently in Indonesia and Vietnam, where everyday goods are needed, who you could partner with as well. I would also really consider working with distributors for that reason, because they can also support with getting through those language barriers, just to make sure that it's seamless in terms of the delivery portions of it. Work with partners on the ground, really consider the time to market when you are entering.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. As I said, an important consideration really as a part of that route to market for many brands. I have another question from one of our guests is, how do you prepare to compete with local manufacturers, and in particular, consumers that may have, middle to low income purchasing power? So obviously price is always a key driver. So appreciate your response either. Austin, I think Metagenics probably quite a premium brand in the market. And Amanda, I'm sure you've had experience across a number of brands across the various tiers. So I might start with you, Austin.
Yeah, it's a good question. And the local brands, they're extremely hard to compete against just based on price. And I never want to compete solely on price. So international brands naturally will have that value. However, that's not going to win you the offering alone. You need to provide a unique differentiator. And so what we've started to do is that we intentionally don't compete with those brands. We target consumers that are more educated on those specific offerings, and we also need to invest in that education. So what we like to do is go after the blue sea versus the red sea. So, for example, in probiotics, we may have some general probiotics for gut health, but we also have more of the blue sea where there's functional probiotics for other conditions, whether it's skin or brain, which might have a lot less competition and can warrant a premium price point. So I think the blue sea versus the red sea, to be able to build a brand presence, and then that can help you build brand equity over time. So we always want to be mindful of, competing on price because we're never going to win that battle. And then the other piece of that is just localizing the content and meeting the consumer where they're at in terms of point of purchase. So we need to be on all the marketplaces. We need to be very strong in social commerce because that's now the new norm with most of these consumers. And so we need to be understanding our distributor can do live streaming, all of these opportunities here, but we really need to have a unique protectable point of difference or a unique point of difference in order to justify the price point.
Yeah, great response, Amanda. Is there anything you'd like to add to Austin's reply there?
I think Austin was very spot on in the way that he said you have to educate your consumer. It's important to consider also how you want to position your brand in this market and understand how your competitors are also reaching out and engaging with them. So if there's a way for you to differentiate yourself, try and test in the market. There's a lot of we've worked with a range of brands at my firm, and you would have to try the various strategies and see also what works best for your team and with the kinds of resources that you have internally. So just be very mindful about, not launching into a really big campaign and not being able to fulfill it there going forward. So being mindful of your internal resources and what you're trying to achieve externally, just so that you are engaged on both ends, consumer and yourself.
Yeah, our next question from an audience member talks to direct sales being a really large part in the Southeast Asian market. So in terms of longevity, do Amanda and Alison, do you feel that this is a long-term marketing strategy that's still sustainable?
Andrew, can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, sure. It's just respecting about direct sales in the Southeast Asian markets. So direct sales, I think it's a large part. I'm familiar in particular with selling products online, via TV shows, what have you. Very different to what you'd experience in Australia that many Queenslanders may not be familiar with. So do you think that direct sales component in South Asia will continue to be an important market strategy? Amanda, you also provided a slide on bricks and mortar stores with that direct sale component. So that B2C model, is that going to continue to dominate versus that B2B model?
Sorry, I was on mute, but I definitely think that it's important to have a physical aspect. So, working with a retailer for it, because for and I also speak from experience of, having traveled this region, that in Southeast Asia, people love to go out. And it's more of a lot of homes out here in Southeast Asia do not have air conditioning, and so a lot of people would take a trip to the mall, for instance, and they would walk around and sort of spend their Saturday and Sunday there. It's a nice, comfortable environment, and that's also how they engage with products. So if you look at their daily habits and you consider how to market your product such that it's in line with that, that's where you're likely to see most success. I think that physical component is also really important for a lot of office workers out here in Singapore. Sometimes we get products that we're familiar with delivered, but if we're walking through the city, we'd like to go to a premium grocery store, take a look at what cheeses there are on sale, what wines there are, and that's how you engage. That's how you engage with them. Trade shows are also a really good option. Being at sort of festivals, that's also a really great way to engage, promote your product. Sponsoring even for some of these big events, like say out here in Singapore, you have the Formula One. Just having your name in different places, making sure you're visible. That's something important to consider. That being said, in terms of like a long-term strategy, I'm never one to really recommend thinking about it very, very long term. I think short to medium term is always important because consumer preferences change very frequently out here. So think about your brand positioning. You can definitely position yourself as a premium brand long term, but how you engage with consumers, short to medium term is the way to go.
Thanks, Amanda. My next question's to you, Austin, and I'm just wondering, how have you approached testing new markets across Southeast Asia and in that Asian region, particularly using digital first or cross-border e-commerce model like the Shopee International platform? I know, Amanda, I was fascinated to learn it's the number one platform with Lazada number two. So how has Metagenics utilised that in the region?
Sure. Yeah. So adding to kind of what Amanda said, I think it's a great point that, we need to meet the consumer where they're at. So an omni-channel approach is always a good option, but digital first, because the cost and the upfront investment versus going to brick and mortar might be, a bit less. So that's where you can always test a bit, and then you could look at an omni-channel strategy. So to that question, Andrew, the biggest player, as Amanda talked about in her presentation, is Shopee. A lot of these big platforms have also set up some last mile delivery logistics to do cross-border e-commerce into these new markets. So maybe if you're not sure what market you want to go into, you're in an industry that, it needs to require a lot of upfront investment, cross-border e-commerce is the way to go. So Shopee has a program called Shopee International Program, where they can basically fulfill last mile delivery into these different markets, Malaysia, Thailand, from their warehouse. So they have one in Singapore, Hong Kong, as well as one in Shenzhen. But basically you can have your products housed, and then they could provide last mile delivery into those different markets. So you can still be listed on the marketplace in Shopee. It's not going to necessarily be registered in market, but this is a good opportunity to test and learn and identify ways that you can see what are the right products, what type of consumers going after my product. And now I have a clear strategy to invest in that specific market where I'm gaining traction. So the Shopee International Program, as well as other platforms out there that help to capitalize on cross-border e-commerce.
Yeah, thanks so much, Austin. A question to you, Amanda, is from your advisory experience, what are some of the key regulatory hurdles that you find that companies face when they're entering this region, and how do you think they can effectively navigate them?
I think in a changing landscape right now, so learning about your tariff and non-tariff barriers is important. Also checking what kinds of licenses that you need. Say if you're an alcohol exporter, for instance, making sure that you have the right licenses and you also have the right time to get that applied for, and before you actually even engage partners on the ground there, that's quite important. Language barriers as well, making sure you have the right set of contacts that can actually help you with there. And so that's really where I would redirect some of these participants in today's webinar to consult with experts like your team, Andrew, and consultancies in the region. I think that's very important in really getting a hold of what the existing and new even barriers are, because some of these change to various degrees. But all in all, I would say one of the easiest ways to understand the market is just to do your research. Research on the kind of product that you need, the kind of licensing, and what other people are facing in terms of challenges. So there's no one specific hurdle, I would say. It's a whole range for a very wide and fragmented market out here, but consult with experts like TIQ here.
Yeah, fantastic, Amanda. Again, I think today's been a brilliant session, and appreciate both your time, Amanda and Austin. Great to have a case study of a Queensland brand that's being exported to the world, and delighted to be joined by our Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner there in Ho Chi Minh City for Southeast Asia, Shannon Lay. Again, I'd like to acknowledge Shannon's team. I'd like to acknowledge Boyd, Suzanne, Dee, Reza, and my many colleagues that have helped put together today's session. My colleague Simon will share his screen and will put up a QR code that you can see now. We would encourage that you provide your feedback on this webinar session. We look forward to bringing you more of these sessions on different markets. But we will be sharing out the link to this recording and a copy of today's presentation. If you've got any questions about Trade and Investment Queensland, please visit our website and book a time with a member of our team who can help support you to go global and to launch overseas. For now, thanks for a great session, and look forward to speaking with you all soon. Bye and good day.